Hello and welcome to today's practice edition of the race weekend data analysis for the Portuguese Grand Prix that is about to come up this Sunday. And today we are going over all of the practice data that has just concluded. It is currently coming up to 2 o'clock. I've got just 1 hour until qualifying starts to get this video recorded and then edited and uploaded just after qualifying. But don't fret, I will be recording the qualifying edition after all of the qualifying data has all been concluded, and that should come out slightly later this evening. And in today's practice edition, we'll be going over briefly the practice sessions, practice 1, 2, and 3, and then collating all of the data and mushing it together and comparing each of the teammates. Everything is all stamped in the description down below, so you can skip to whichever section you would like me to talk about, whether it's the brief overview of all of the sessions or a particular teammate battle that you would like to listen to. So without further ado, we will jump on into the race weekend data analysis for Portugal and take a look at the practice data like I just said. We begin, of course, with practice number uno, topped by Valtteri Bottas. This time, quite interestingly, from the two Red Bulls, Max Verstappen leading Sergio Perez, with Charles Leclerc's Ferrari popping up into P4, Lewis Hamilton having a slightly struggling session in practice 1 down in P5 with Gasly in P6, and Russell storming to P7 in the Williams. That is insane. And then practice 2, it is still a Mercedes on top, but this time it is Lewis Hamilton, headed once again by Max Verstappen in P2 as Bottas slips to P3. Sainz is now up to P4 with the two Alpines in P5 and P6. Then Charles Leclerc P7 slipping slightly from P4 as Stroll makes it into the top 10 for Aston Martin, with Norris and the McLarens having a slightly iffy session in 8th and 12th. And looking a bit further down that order, Vettel in the Aston Martin has come forward 1 place to P15, then the two Alfa Romeos are 16th and 17th, with Latifi splitting the two Haas cars. But we head then to practice 3, the session that has just ended before qualifying, and it is topped by Max Verstappen. The first 1 minute 18 time as well, a 1 minute 18.4, then comes Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. There is going to be a titanic battle between these two for pole position. Sergio Perez is P4, then Esteban Ocon P5, that Alpine really having an upturn in pace. Then the two Ferraris headed by Lando Norris, then Raikkonen splits the two Alfa Tauris in P10 with Alonso down in P14, but don't fret, Alonso fans and Spanish fans, he had his fastest lap time deleted, which was a 1 minute 18.7. He was up there with Lewis Hamilton, but he went slightly wide at turn number 1, so he has a lot more pace in hand than P14. But an absolutely abysmal session for the two Aston Martins, P16 and P18. Lance Stroll has a slightly new floor, an updated floor kit on his car compared to Sebastian Vettel, who does not have that, and has said before this weekend has begun that the car is not doing what he wants it to do. He is not happy in his Aston Martin whatsoever, and that clearly shows. Being P15 is his best spot so far this weekend, and maybe not even going to get out of Q1. That's the position that Aston Martin find themselves in. They may not even get out of Q1. But collating all of these times and whacking them into a graph, we can take a look at the driver progression, and we can see that there is an enormous pace difference between Mazepin in both practice 1 and practice 2 to the rest of the field, where he slightly joins Latifi at the end, but he is still last in all 3 sessions. Interestingly, the teams sort of stagnate from FP1 to FP2 before improving to FP3, whether they're just running race runs and things like that, not 100% sure. It's just quite interesting to see that they stagnate and then they improve first. And then mushing the two teammates' times together into one team, we can then work out the team's fastest improvements, or the most improved team, from FP1 to FP2, and that turns out to be Alpine. As a team, they improved by almost 0.6 of a second from their fastest FP1 time to their fastest FP2 time, whereas Williams actually went backwards. They lost almost half a second. And then conversely, looking at the teams that improved most from FP2 to FP3, it's Alfa Romeo, 1.8 seconds, some enormous pace gains between these two sessions compared to FP1 to FP2, with Aston Martin improving the least, half a second down on Williams, just 0.3 improvement from FP2 to FP3. Not an ideal session, not an ideal practice whatsoever for either Aston Martin car. But now for the bit that everyone is most interested in, the teammate breakdowns. I have timestamped every single team so you can skip to whichever one you would like me to talk about, but of course we begin with Mercedes. We are going in 2020 championship order, and it was Valtteri Bottas that was leading Lewis Hamilton in practice 1 and keeping up his head-to-head record in practice 1 so far, 3-0 over the Brit. However, in practice 2 it is 2-1 in favour of Lewis Hamilton, and come practice 3 it is 3-0 in favour of Lewis Hamilton. But taking a look at the practice gaps in the top right graph, we can see that Valtteri Bottas was 0.3 ahead in practice 1 when Hamilton was having his sort of confidence issues or tyre issues, etc. And that 0.3 gap is a little bit faster. It's a tenth faster than Bottas's average gap over Hamilton in FP1 so far this season. Compared that to Hamilton's FP2 advantage of 0.3, that again is a tenth quicker than his average so far this season. But his FP3 gap of a tenth of a second is about 0.2 down on what we've seen so far in his average season. And with the pro forma and practice panel all done and dusted for Mercedes, we apply exactly the same data strategy to Red Bull, and we can see that it is absolutely and utterly dominated by Max Verstappen. In FP3, Verstappen has actually led every single session so far. Verstappen has led all of the FP3 sessions. That's very, very interesting. And it is 3-0 in favour of Verstappen in FP1 and FP3, and then 2-1 in favour of Verstappen in FP2. He is comfortably, by about 0.3 of a second on average across the 3 sessions, faster than Sergio Perez, and each of these times are slower than his season averages so far. This is good to see that Sergio Perez is slightly getting closer to Max Verstappen. We'll see what he can do if he can overcome this deficit. But from Red Bull, we take a look at McLaren, and again, they are so exceptionally close. On average, about 0.3 separates the two cars, regardless of which driver is in front, and comparing those to the averages, again, they're a little bit slow compared to Lando Norris's averages against Daniel Ricciardo in the 3 sessions, whereas Ricciardo's FP2 time is exactly equal to his average so far this season, and it is 2-1 to Lando Norris in the head-to-head in every single session, FP1, FP2 and FP3, and all of the drivers have been a little bit inconsistent in their positions, in their positional graphs on the left hand side throughout this season so far. They haven't really been consistently inside the top 10 or consistently outside the top 10. They're just sort of all over the place. And then from McLaren we take a look at Aston Martin and the biggest disappointment ever. This team is struggling a lot. And FP2 and FP3 even, they're very consistent, and they're consistently at the back, especially in terms of Sebastian Vettel. On average, he's about 4-5 tenths down across the 3 sessions, which is just not what you want to see. I know it's a new team and a new car, but he's an experienced driver. He's a 4-time Formula 1 world champion, and he is being outclassed by Lance Stroll. The averages are much faster so far than what Stroll has done this season, yet in FP2 and FP1 as well. Not at all a good showing from Sebastian Vettel, but I am willing to give him a couple more races as it is a new team and a new environment to get used to. So a couple more races I will give him. But from Aston Martin, we take a look at Alpine, and these cars are exceptionally similar. Now, unfortunately, Fernando Alonso did have his 1 minute 18.7 lap time deleted, which would have put him ahead of Esteban Ocon in FP3. However, lap time got deleted, and therefore he went back to a 19.8 or a 19.9 or something like that, which is a little bit unfortunate for him, as he's now actually 2-1 behind in the head-to-head in favour of Ocon. So expect both Alpines actually to probably get into Q3 and maybe even fight for a P3 or a P4 spot. Definitely a row on or a spot on the second row of the grid. Definitely top 5 is what I think they should be aiming for, and it is going to be so very awesome to see this battle, to see what Alonso can finally do in a decent car. But heading now to the second half of the field, and we take a look at Ferrari, and these two are very, very similar. Once again, if we take a look at the FP2 positions charts, it's Charles Leclerc that has been P4 in every single session. And then we've also got FP3, where they are very, very similar as well. They're very, very consistent, Ferrari. They're consistently just inside the top 10, which is a massive, massive improvement. But looking at the averages, we've got Charles Leclerc leading Carlos Sainz by 0.8 of a second in the first session, which is double his FP1 average so far this season. However, the remaining averages, where again they change and swap positions, are much, much lower than their season so far. So Carlos Sainz is getting considerably closer to Charles Leclerc and actually overcoming him and beating him in some sessions. But Leclerc can always pull out a mega performance in qualifying, so I would like to see Sainz actually put in a good qualifying performance. But again, new team, new environment, I'll give him a couple of races to get used to it. And from Ferrari, we take a look at Alfa Tauri, a team that is again dominated by one driver, and that driver is Pierre Gasly. Yuki Tsunoda has seemed a touch on the inconsistent side for me, but again, it is his very first season. He's also younger than me as well, and he's in a brand new team, and a team that Gasly is very much used to. So I am again going to give him a lot of time to get used to this car. And in terms of the average gaps, they're actually slightly coming down. It's 0.6 in favour of Gasly in FP1, whereas the session or the season average so far has been 1.5 seconds in favour of Gasly. FP2 this race has been 0.5 of a second, half a second overall, whereas the average has been 6.5 tenths. And then the FP3 average, Gasly has been in front this session by 1/10, whereas the average has been half a second. So a much, much better race weekend so far for Yuki Tsunoda. And from Alfa Tauri, we take a look at Alfa Romeo, the second Alfa car, and for the first time this season, it was Giovinazzi to take a step out in an FP1 session in favour of Callum Ilott actually coming in, which was so very good to see. Giovinazzi was then back in the car in FP2 and FP3, where he was actually beaten by Kimi Räikkönen in both sessions, only just in FP2 by 1/1000th of a second, but then almost 2/10 in FP3, which is just under Kimi Räikkönen's FP3 average so far. It is 2-1 in favour of Räikkönen in FP1 and FP2, but 2-1 in favour of Giovinazzi in FP2. And then penultimately, in today's practice edition of the Race Weekend Data Analysis, we take a look at Haas. And there is an enormous chasm between these two drivers. I am so very surprised that it has taken so long for Mazepin to get up to speed. For goodness sake, he's done several hundred kilometers in private Mercedes testing over the past 3 or 4 years, and he's trash. I know lots of people seem surprised at this, but I tried to give him a little bit of some sort of hope that he could be half decent, but sadly, he is not. And in FP1, the gap was 2.2 seconds between the two cars, with the session average or the season average being 1.3 in favour of Mick so far. FP2, the gap was 1.1 seconds, with the season average being almost 0.6, and then FP3, the gap was 6.5 tenths, with the season average so far being 0.6. So Mazepin is actually getting worse so far as the season is progressing, which is not ideal whatsoever. But equally, we have seen both drivers struggling a bucket ton with this car, not only in this session in FP3 in particular, as there weren't any incidents in FP1 or FP2, the car is just a dog to drive. It doesn't look enjoyable, it doesn't look fun, neither driver is able to actually put in any decent, any notable performances, which is a big shame. But then finally from Haas, we take a look at Williams, and George Russell put in an absolute ass-whooping performance against Nicholas Latifi, much like we have seen him do in many of the previous years. In FP1, he was 1.7 seconds faster than Nicholas Latifi, actually putting his car in the top 10. That is incredible, with his season average so far being almost a second, so he is 0.7 quicker than his season average in this session alone. FP2, it was a little bit down, it was 0.8 ahead of Nicholas Latifi with a season average of again almost 1 second, but FP3, it was just over half a second, with his average across this season being 0.4 of a second. And there we go, there is the end of today's practice edition of the Race Weekend Data Analysis. I've now got to quickly edit all of this and then upload it just after qualifying and then record the qualifying edition as well. But don't worry, that is coming out slightly later today. But please let me know in the comments down below what you thought of all of the practice information, and then also if the qualifying has come out as well, you can let me know about that. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode with whatever and whenever I decide to make it. I'll see you guys then.